Hey, what's going on, everyone? Everybody good? Good. Today, friends, we are learning Daf Pei of Masechta Shabbos. Yeah. Look, it's a good daf. It's nothing too crazy. Yesterday I think got a little hard to follow there at the end with all that tefillin stuff and dochsostrus and klaf and tefillin and mezuzah and flipping back and forth. Yeah, that was a kind of funny thing. Look, man, I think it's just a hard perek, hotzah, all that stuff. So today we're getting back to some concepts today of hotzah, like we were familiar with once upon a time, about 2 months ago already, or more, at the beginning of the Masechta. We're going to mention like things like Carmelis and Rosh Hashanah and things like that. Anyways, but it's not too crazy. But that's like the kind of vibe for today, at least for the first half of the day. So, at the beginning, we're going to talk about if you take out, like basically in two kind of trips, right? We're going to talk about taking out ink, which we said was enough to write 2 letters. So what if you do like 1 letter at a time, so to speak? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Then we move on to the halachas of eyeshadows a little bit. Different quantities and definition for taking out lime. Okay? And then we're going to get to a new Mishnah, but the new Mishnah is also going to be talking a little bit about lime, and I guess we're going to know about all sorts of different uses and applications for lime. Okay? Let's go weiter, friends. Ein Testament Bay is all the way at the bottom. Diok Kidei Lichtov, and now we are already on our daf, which is Pei Amud Aleph. So we had said in our Mishnah that if you take out enough ink to write 2 letters, so then you're going to be chayav for taking out the ink. So Tana, we learned in a brayso shtei osios b'dio. Okay, so if you take out enough ink for 2 letters, so he's talking about dio, which is like dry ink, I guess. I think at one point we had learned that the way to create dio would be like to burn maybe some kind of oil or something, and then it would create black smoke, and then you would have like a glass kind of thing above the black smoke, and it would just kind of collect the pigment from the black smoke, and then you would use that to make dio, to make this ink or something. Anyways, so apparently this dio is talking about dry ink. If you take out enough dry ink that I guess you would be able to, I don't know, maybe mix with water or somehow write 2 letters worth. So you're going to be chayav. And shtei osios bekulmus, or if you take out a like quill, and in the quill is enough ink to write 2 letters. Okay, and now remember we've learned in the past. Like for example, if you take out fruit in some kind of a kli, in some kind of receptacle, so the receptacle is irrelevant. What's important is the actual thing that you're taking out. So if you're wondering like, well, wouldn't you be chayav for taking out the quill? Well, the quill is just really a receptacle for the ink that is in it that you're going to write with. So therefore what's important is the ink that's in the quill. And if there's less than 2 letters worth of ink in the quill, well, then there's no shear of ink, and the quill is just batel to the, or tafel really, I think, to the ink. Okay? Shtei osios bekalmarin, or enough ink in an inkwell to write 2 letters. But Rava wants to know, os achas b'dio, os achas b'kulmus, os achas b'kalmarin mahu. What if you take out 1 letter's worth of dio, 1 letter's worth of ink in a quill, and 1 letter's worth of ink in a inkwell? Will you be chayav for that? Will they join together? And guess what the Gemara answers? Teku. Ask Eliyahu Hanavi. Amar Rav, says Rav, Hotzi shtei osios v'chasvan kshu mahalich chayav. Isn't that interesting? Ksivasan zoe anachasan. That if you take out enough ink, because remember, going all the way back to the first daf of Masechta Shabbos. Remember Akira and Hanacha. When it comes to hotzah, you have to pick something up in Rosh Hashanah and put it down in Rosh Hashanah, or vice versa, whatever. So, what happens if you pick up 2 letters worth of ink inside your house, and now you take it outside, right? And he says what? He says, Kishuhu mahalech, meaning he's walking, he doesn't stop, right? Meaning once you stop your body, so it's killing you put down this ink. So he didn't stop moving, but he wrote them down. So the ink has kind of rested once they've been written down. So you pick them up in Rishus HaYachid, you wrote them down in Rishus HaRabim. So we say he's going to be chayiv for that because Ksivasan Zoya Nachasan. Writing the ink down is ki'ilu, you're putting down the ink. I mean, I imagine you're probably also chayiv for writing, but you'd also be chayiv for otzah. Exciting times. V'amar Rava, and said Rava, Hotzi os achas v'chosva. Okay, so says Rava, what happens if you take out enough ink for one letter, and then you write the letter, right? Let's say you took out a quill that had enough ink in it for one letter, and then you proceeded to write down that letter. But remember, you need two letters in order to be chayiv, but you just did one letter. And then you brought out another one letter's worth of ink, and you wrote that down. So keilu, in total, you took out 2 letters worth of ink and wrote them down. But individually, you only did one at a time. So we say pater. My time, how come you're pater? At the end of the day, you brought out 2 letters worth of ink and wrote them down. So the answer is be'idna de apka levasraisa chasr le'shua de kamaisa. So the answer is interesting, that when you write down that first letter, so actually as the letter dries, some of its volume gets lost. So once you bring out that second letter's worth, the initial amount that you brought out is actually not 1 letter's worth anymore, because when it dried, it lost a shtickle. So you're going to be pater. However, we do already see though that conceptually you would have been chayiv, meaning if not for the fact that the first shear is already small, a little bit smaller, if you do 1 melacha in 2 goes, right, half a shear for each, you would theoretically be chayiv. And we're going to see this, as the Gemara develops. V'amar Rava, additionally Rava said, Hotzi chatzi grogeres achas v'inicha. Okay, so he took out to Rishus HaRabim 1/2 of a dried fig, and he put it down. Okay, so Akira and Rishus HaYachid, Hanacha and Rishus HaRabim, but we're only talking about a half a shear over here. V'chazer v'otzi chatzi grogeres achas v'inicha. But then he did the other half of the melacha. He took out another half of a dried fig, went out to Rishus HaRabim, and put it down. So in total, he did a whole melacha. Naisa k'misha kalta kelev o shenisrfa upater. Well, that came out of left field. So it's ki'ilu a dog ate the first one, or it got burnt up, and therefore ki'ilu, it's just like he only did one of them. Meaning, we treat the first half of a dried fig as if it just disintegrated and got lost. And therefore it's pater. V'amai, hamancha. 1 second. Why? Why does that make any sense? Keilu, he took out the first half of a fig, put it down. Took out another half of a fig, put it down. He did in total, he did a complete melacha. Why the heck are we coming up with this extremely random reasoning, which is, well, we treat the first half a fig as if it was eaten by a dog or just like got burnt up. So ha'achikami, this is what Rav is saying. So this is interesting. If before putting down the second half a fig, he had lifted up the first half a fig, well then naisis rishona kimishniklata o shenisirfa ufater. Well then that first half a fig that he had put down, since he now picked it up before putting down the second one, it's ki'ilu the first one was snatched up by a dog or got burnt up. Okay? Meaning, because when he put down the first half a fig, he didn't do anything wrong, because it was, or at least he wouldn't be chayiv for that, because he only did half a shear. But then before doing the second half of the shear, he then picked up. So you don't really have, at the end of the day, you can't really point at any full shiur that you had picked up in Rishus HaYachid and put down in Rishus HaRabim, because you had never had a full shear put down in Rishus Harabim, because once you put down the second half of the fig, you already picked up the first one, so it's not lying there anymore. So Kilu. Okay. V'amar Rava, says Rava. Hotzi chatzi grogeres v'inicha. So let's say you take half a dried fig and you put it down in Rishus Harabim. Okay. V'chazav hotzi chatzi grogeres, and now you take another half of a dried fig. I guess there's lots of stuff you can do with halves of dried figs. So this time what he does is, ve'vira derech aleha. Now he doesn't put it down. That's the thing. He doesn't put it down. Chayiv. Nonetheless he's chayiv. So he picked up half a dried fig from his house, went outside, put it down. Great. Goes back inside, takes another half a fig and goes outside, but he doesn't actually just put it down. He's just kind of dangling it. And he's going to be chayiv. Alright. Ve'amai. How come he's chayiv? Hello, nach. You didn't do a hanacha. So why should you be chayiv? And I guess he didn't stop moving either, I guess. So kigon, shavira toch shlosha. So the Gemara answers, well, it's because he, is passing this, the second half of a dried fig, within 3 tfachim of the ground, which makes it Rishus HaRabim. Ve'amar Rava toch shlosha l'Rabbanan tzarech hanacha al gabe mashu. But doesn't Rava say that even according to the Rabbanan who don't say, do you remember this argument of kluta kamoshu nachadami? That once something goes into the airspace of something, it's considered as if it landed? Well, the Rabbanan don't hold of that, okay? The Rabbanan don't hold of kluta kamoshu nachadami, which means that just because something is in the airspace of something else doesn't mean that it landed there. And therefore, the fact that he's just dangling it here within 3 tfachim of Rishus Harabim, that doesn't matter. It would have to land there. So lokasha, kam bezori, kam b'mayvir, depends. If you throw something, so that's where the Chacham say it would have to land on something. However, if you are just passing it and holding it and hovering it within 3 tfachim of Rishus Harabim, of the ground, so then you're going to be chayiv because this thing is like it's landed on your hand, ki'ilu, right? So therefore you're going to be chayiv for that. It's ki'ilu, it landed. So, alright, there we go. Half figs, dangling, chayav, great. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Hotzi chatzi grogeres, v'chazav hotzi chatzi grogeres, behelam echad chayav. Okay. So if he takes out half of a fig, and then he takes out another half of a fig, and the entire time he didn't realize oh wait, I shouldn't be taking out half figs. So ki'ilu, he basically takes out a whole fig. Ki'ilu, he took out half a fig, and then he took out the second half of fig, all in the same ha'elem. So he's chayiv, because essentially he took out a whole fig. Okay? B'shtei ha'alamos pater. But if he did it in 2 ha'alamos, ki'ilu, he took out the first half of fig, and then he realized oh right, alright, that's probably, I shouldn't do that. And then he, I guess, forgets again, and he does it a second time. So, then he's going to be patur, because that realization in the middle, I guess, separates the 2 shears. Now, if you remember on Daf Ayin Aleph Mid Beis, we had the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel, who says, Ein yediyah lechatzi shear, that there is no concept of a yediyah for half of a shear. So maybe he would disagree with this? I don't know. Maybe he would. Maybe he wouldn't. But I don't know, it sounds like he probably would. Alright, let's go weiter. Let's see. Apparently he says what he says on Kuf Beis. Does this come up in Kuf Beis? I don't know. I don't see a dart in. Let's go weiter. Rabbi Yossi Omer, says the holy Rabbi Yossi, Behelam echad lirshus echad chayev. So when we say that he's chayev if he does these 2 half figs, so in 1 he'elem, so right, in 1 absence of knowledge, so then he's chayev, but that's only the rishus echad, right? The rishus echad chayev, the shtei rishus is pater. So if you were to do it, so if you were, wow, okay, so how to explain this? So if you're looking in the regular sort of Gemara, in the text of the Gemara, so in Rashi there's actually like an illustration, okay? If not, I guess probably what I'll do is I'll provide an illustration here. But let's just understand the first concept, because that one's easier. So, for example, if my house is Rishus HaYachid and outside my house is Rishus HaRabim, okay? So, if I take out a half a fig from my house to Rishus HaRabim, then I go back inside, I take out another half a fig and go out to Rishus HaRabim, well then I'm chayiv, right? Assuming it was all the same ha'elim. But what if, like in the depiction of Rashi, let me explain what's going on in the depiction of Rashi, and I will create this imagery as well and share it with everyone so that we can all be talking about the same thing. But basically, let me explain what's going on in this image. So what's going on in this image is that in the middle here, right, in that middle, so basically you have a house on either extreme end, and then right in front of each house is a Rishus HaRabim, and then in between either Rishus HaRabim is a, for now let's call it Rishus HaYachid, okay? So in that case, so you have two distinct Rishus HaRabims. So what Rabbi Yossi is saying is that if you would, let's say, go into the top house, and that, right, the house on the top of the diagram, and you would take a half a grogeris, and you would go out from that house into Rishus HaRabim and put it down. Then you would go to that other house on the opposite side, and you would take out a half a fig, and you would go out to the Rishus HaRabim in front of that house and put it down. You would be pater. Because even though you brought out two half shiurim in one ha'elim from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim, it was two different Rishus HaRabims, and therefore you are going to be pater. That is what Rabbi Yossi says. Amar Rabba, says Rabba, v'usha yesh chiyuv chatos b'neim. Now Rabba says that in order for these two Rishus HaRabims to be considered distinct Rishus HaRabims, that means, right, in between them, right, so that area in between either Rishus HaRabim, right, the middle area of the diagram, must be a full-fledged Rishus HaYachid, okay, a Mida Oraisa, something, right, a Chiyuv Chatas, right, something that you'll be Chayav Chatas for, carrying between it and the Rishus HaRabim, right, i.e. Rishus HaYachid. So you need these two Rishus HaRabims to be considered, to be separated by a Rishus HaYachid in between them in order for them to be considered, in order to be pater, okay? Aval Carmel is low. But if there was a Carmelis in between the two Rishus HaRabims, so then you would be chayav, because it wouldn't be considered a proper separation. It would all be considered one Rishus HaRabim. Abaye Amar Afilu Carmelis Aval Pislalo. Abaye says that area in the middle can even be a Carmelis, and if there's a Carmelis in between them, they'll be considered two separate Rishus HaRabims. But if there is some kind of big tree of sorts separating the two Rishus HaRabims, so then it would still be considered just one Rishus HaRabim. That wouldn't be considered a proper separation. V'Rava Amar Afilu Pisla. Rava says you can even separate these two Rishus HaRabims by just some kind of long log that you have in between them. Ve'az the Rava l'taimei the Amar Rava Rishus Shabbis Kishus Git and Damya, because Rava says that Rishuyos, different domains on Shabbos, are just like the different domains when it comes to a husband giving a divorce document to his wife, right? And what's considered, giving it to her, and I think you can just like throw it into her domain or something like that. So what's considered her domain over there? So and it would seem that a pisla is considered a significant domain for gittin, for divorce documents. So that would work here as well to divide up the two Rishus HaRabims, to consider them to be two distinct Rishus HaRabims. Well, I think that's about it basically for all this like Hotzah. Well, no, not for the Hotzah. We're still doing Hotzah, but like for the different Rishuyos and diagrams and stuff. Friends, let's move on. Kol kedei likol ayin achas, okay? Enough eyeshadow in order to put onto one eye. Ayin achas halo kachle. But who does that? I am no eyeshadow expert, I must admit. But the Gemara seems to be saying that people don't really put eyeshadow on just one eye. Okay? Amar Ravuna sheken tznuos kochlos ayin achas. This is very interesting. So Ravuna says, well, there are certain women who literally cover their entire bodies, including even one of their eyes. The only thing exposed is one eye. And the interesting thing is that I guess if the only thing exposed is one eye, you may as well put makeup on it. It's kind of funny, right? It's like they're like so tsanua that like they literally want to like just walk around completely invisible and covered. But if one eye is going to be poking through, you may as well put on makeup. Alright. Cool. So, anyways, so these tsunuos women put eyeshadow on this one eye. Meisvei, but we have a kasha. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, says Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Kol, so when it comes to eyeshadow, im l'refua k'dei l'kol ayin achas, im l'kashet b'beis einayim. But Reb Shimon ben Elazar says, we have a brisa, right? Rafuna is an Amora, but we have a brisa that says that when it comes to eyeshadow, so if it's for healing, so then, if you're taking it out for healing, so then the shear would be one eye. But if it's for makeup, like it sounds like what Rav Huna is describing, well, then the shear would be 2 eyes. So why is Rav Huna saying it's 1 eye and explaining that it's tnuos? It sounds like it would be 2 eyes. Okay, so Hillel Breda of Shmuel bar Nachmani explains this brisa referring to women who live in like villages. Okay, I know Iranios sounds like it would be cities, but Rashi defines it as villages. That basically, they want to explain like this: that when Rav Huna is saying, talking about these snuos with their 1 eye exposed, and they would put eyeshadow on it. So that's talking about in cities. That I guess in the bigger cities, there's a lot more going on, a lot more people, a lot more happenings, a lot more excitement, a lot more potential for, exposure to, let's say, relationships or interactions between different people that some people might want to avoid. And therefore, in cities, you might have these women who would prefer to completely cover themselves up, only exposing 1 eye. And on that, Rav Huna is saying that eyeshadow for 1 eye would be significant enough over there to go out to Rishus HaRabim. The Brisa, which says that eyeshadow you would need for both eyes, so that is in a village where there isn't as much going on, and I guess it's you don't really have these women who, for whatever reason, would want to be completely covered except for 1 eye, and in those cases, everyone's going to have 2 eyes exposed. So in that case, Hotzah would be by 2 eyes, and that's what the Brisa is talking about. Shaiva, k'dei litein al pi nekev cotton. So enough wax to put on a small hole. Tana k'dei litein al pi nekev cotton shel yain. Okay, so let's say you have like some kind of flask of wine or something, and you have some small hole where the wine can come out of, and now you want to cover it, so you put some wax on it. Devek k'dei litein b'rosh hashafshaf, enough glue to put on top of some kind of board. So Tana k'dei litein b'rosh shafshaf sheb'rosh kana shel tzayadin. All right. So there were certain trappers that they would put like a board on top of some kind of reed. I don't know, maybe like some kind of like bamboo or something. And then what would happen is a unassuming bird would sit on this glue and get stuck. And that's how they would trap these birds. So enough glue to put in their bird traps so that they get stuck. Zephes v'gofris, pitch and sulfur, k'dei lasos chule. So right, that tana k'dei lasos nekev cotton, so to make a small hole. And I think that there was an opinion that just got rid of this from the Gemara because it's basically just quoting our Mishnah, that sometimes you would have like this little cylinder, I don't know if cylinder is the right word, I feel like it's not, but some little thing that had like some mercury in it or something, and then you'd want to like cover it. So, and then you'd put like a small hole in it so you can get the mercury out. So that is what this pitch and sulfur is talking about. Chaysis k'dei lasos pikor chule, enough crushed brick in order to make an opening for a, I keep on forgetting what the word is, but it's like some kind of like furnace that they would make, like gold and silver in, I guess. So limemra de shiura de Rabbi Yehuda nafish. So 1 second. So the Mishnah had said enough of this crushed bricks in order to make this opening for this like furnace thing. Now Rabbi Yehuda said it's enough to make a tripod for this furnace that you would put the furnace on. This thing that you get really hot. So it would sound like Rabbi Yehuda's shear is larger than the Chacham. The Chacham said just some opening for some like hot oven furnace thing. Whereas Yehuda said it's actually the stand that the oven would be on. It would sound like that would require a lot more of this crushed brick. So the name of the Shira de Rabbi Yehuda Nafish, is that to say that the amount for Rabbi Yehuda that he says that you be chayev for Hotzah and Shabbos, it's a larger amount, i.e. it's more lenient? But we hold that Shira de Rabbanan Nafish, that the measure of the rabbis is always going to be larger than the measure of Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda is going to be more stringent. The Tanan, as we learn in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, says the holy Rabbi Yehuda, Kedei litol emenu midas minol likatin, right? When it came to how much of these reeds should you be taking out on Shabbos, so Rabbi Yehuda, so the Chacham said enough to make like a ring for like a sieve and a sifter, whereas Rabbi Yehuda said enough to like wrap around the foot of a child to know how big to make the shoe, and apparently that is a smaller size. Okay, so the Gemara answers, Ema kedei lasud pitput kirektana. No, so we can explain Rabbi Yehuda when he's talking about the tripod, it means that if you have a small tripod and there are like cracks in it or like etches in it and you want to even those out, so then you need a little bit of this meaning, and then you would like cover it with like plaster or whatever, but that's just like very little bit, and that's how much of this crushed brick you would take out. So it's actually smaller than the amount of the Chachamim, who say enough to make this opening for the oven, for this furnace thing. Taner Rabbanan, top of Pamud Beis, Hamotzi Seyar, K'tei legabel bo atit. Interesting. So if you bring out hair on Shabbos, you have to bring out enough hair that you can mix into clay when you're making it to give it some structure. Tit lasos pikor shel tzorf ezav, and enough clay to take out. You have to take out enough clay in order to apply to the opening of this furnace. Okay. Sid kedei lasud, enough lime in order to like remove hair from the small finger of a girl. So Tana kedei lasud etzba ktana shebebanis. So we learn in a brisa, in order to apply to the small finger of a girl to remove the hair, right? Meaning, if she would want to remove all the hair from her body, so already once she would take out enough lime on Shabbos, or the shear on taking out lime on Shabbos is enough already for to remove the hair from the pinky finger, I guess, of a girl. Amar Rav Yudah Amar Rav. Benos Yisrael shegiu lepirkan v'legiu l'shanim. Okay, so Jewish girls, if they reached puberty, but they didn't reach their years, kilu, they already had pubic hairs and they already had hair on their body, but they were young. They weren't necessarily, I guess, 12 years old, and they wanted to remove the hair. All right. So benos aniyim toflos osam besid. So if we're talking about daughters of poor people, so they would remove the hair with lime. Benos ashirim toflos osan besoles. So the daughters of wealthy people would remove the hair with some kind of flour product. Benos melachim toflos osan b'shemen amor. The daughters of kings would remove the hair with myrrh oil. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, when in the context of Esther, when she went to visit Achashverosh for her trial run to see if she would make a good queen. So it says, Shisha chodashim b'shemen amor. So she spent 6 months soaking in shemen amor, and I guess that was to remove hair. So we actually see, so my shemen amor, what is shemen amor? Rav Huna bar Chia amar satkas. Okay, Rav Huna bar Chia says it's this kind of fragrant oil. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba amar shemen zay shlehei b'shlish. Says Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, it is oil from olives that have not reached a third of their growth yet. Tanya, we learn in the Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, an pikanon, shemen zay shlehei b'shlish, that an pikanon is also oil that has not, from olives that have not reached a third of their growth. And how come you apply it to your body? Because it removes hairs and also makes the flesh very good. I guess it gives like good color to your body, to your skin, I guess. Rav Bevai, Havle Barta, Rav Bevai had a daughter, Mazel Tov. Tafla Ever. So he would remove hair from her body by applying, I think it was lime to her body, one limb at a time, meaning not the entire body at once, but one limb at a time. Shakoba dalid meo zuz, wawa wiwa. So, for his daughter, somebody offered him 400 zuz because his daughter was so amazing because of his lime hair removal, limb by limb treatment. Now there was a certain Gentile in his community who saw that, wow, Rav Bevai just won the lottery on account of his lime application technique. So, Avile Barta, so this Gentile had a daughter, Tafla B'chad Zimna. Okay, so he also gave her the lime treatment, but he did it slightly differently, in that he didn't do it limb by limb. He applied it to her entire body at once, Umesa, and she unfortunately died. So Amar, so this Gentile accused Katal Rav Bevai Levarti, that Rav Bevai killed my daughter. Okay. Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman, Rav Bevai dishti shikra bayan bante tafla. Okay. So Rav Nachman asserts that, well, you see, Rav Bevai was a beer drinker. Now, beer drinkers have daughters who have lots of hair. That is why Rav Bevai needed to remove the hair from his daughter in the first place. Anan, however, us, Dilosha Sina Chichra, we don't drink beer. Rav Nachman was a wine guy, right? If you remember from the story with Ula and Yalta, where she destroyed 400 barrels of wine, apparently he liked his wine. So, Lo ba'ayan bantan tifla, well, our daughters don't need to remove hair because we don't drink beer. Beer causes hair in daughters, and wine doesn't. So, we don't have to worry. Or at least we don't have to, whatever. I guess he says that his daughters didn't have hair that would have been removed. Viter. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda, Kidei lasud kilkul, enough lime to put on a kilkul. Now we're going to try to figure out what this kilkul is. You guys ready? You guys ready? Ready to figure out what a kilkul is? Okay. My kilkul, what's a kilkul? My andipe. So Rabbi Nechemiah's opinion was that sid, you had to take out enough to apply to an andipe. An andipi. Okay? What are these things? Amar Rav, so said Rav, tzida uvas tzida. So Rav says it's, one is an application to like the hair on your temples, and one would be an application to like the very small hairs that are beneath the temple that you may want to remove. Okay? But like it sounds like the hair on the temples you don't necessarily want to remove, you just kind of want to hold them in place, whereas the hair beneath the temples you might want to remove. So the member of the shiur de Rabbi Yehuda nafish, okay, is this to say that Rabbi Yehuda's shiur is larger than Rabbi Nechemiah's shiur? Because that's enough lime to put on your temples, but there's more hair on your temples than there are beneath the temples. So, hakaimalan the shiura de rabbanan nafish. So, but don't we know that the rabbi's measure for hotzah on Shabbos is always larger than Rabbi Yehuda's? So how can we say that Rabbi Yehuda's shiur is larger than Rabbi Nechemiah's? So zutu midrabanan v'nafish midrabbi Nechemiah. So we say, well, Rabbi Yehuda's shiur is smaller than the rabbi's shiur. However, it is larger nonetheless than Rabbi Nechemiah's shiur. Meisvei, but we have a kasha on Rav's explanation of saying that lime, according to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemiah, is enough to apply on your temples and beneath your temples, respectively. Amar Rebbe said, Rebbe, Nirin divrei Rabbi Yehuda b'chavot v'divrei Rabbi Nechemiah b'beitzas hasid. So, Rebbe says that it would make sense to say that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion regarding this kilkul would be talking about dissolved lime that is dissolved in water. V'divrei Rabbi Nechemiah b'beitzas hasid, whereas Rabbi Nechemiah's opinion of andipi would make more sense in a sort of clump of lime. Now, now, if it really enters your mind that Rabbi Yehuda means lime to put on the hair on your temples, and Rabbi Nechemiah means lime to put to treat the hair beneath the temples, well, both of those are going to be with chavut. Both of those are going to be with this dissolved lime. But according to Rebbe, only Rabbi Yehuda would make sense with dissolved lime. Rabbi Nechemiah would make more sense with a clump of lime. So Ella Amr Rabbi Yitzchak Amre Divei Rebbe Ami Andipa. Okay, so Rabbi Yitzchak explains in the so Rabbi Yitzchak said that they said that by the Beis Medrash of Rabbi Ami that Rabbi Nechemiah's opinion about these andipe are actually it's a reference to some kind of wine barrel that has a spigot on either end of it, on the top and on the bottom, okay? And you want to plug up the bottom spigot with lime so that none of the wine will come out the bottom. And that is what Rabbi Nehemiah is talking about, and that's better, and that makes sense to use a clump of lime as opposed to dissolved lime. But Maskefla Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana responds to Rabbi Yitzchak, V'chi adam osem ma'osav an paros. Does a person just waste his money like that? Because if you use lime to plug up the spigot at the bottom of your barrel, well, guess what? The wine is just going to dissolve the lime, and all the wine is going to come out. So Ella, Amr of Kahana, Shnasos. So if Kahana says that these clumps of, that Rabbi Nehemiah's opinion, which makes more sense, which you can explain to be clumps of lime, is talking about shnasos. Okay. What are shnasos? Shnasos are basically if you have some kind of a measuring cup, okay, and you have lines on the measuring cup so you can know how much, the amounts are. So you will use some lime, clumps of lime, and you'll stick them into like grooves in the cup so that you'll be able to easily see where the etches are. So Kedetnan, as we learn in the Mishnah, shnasos hayu bahin. So the hin measure, right? Now a hin is 12 lugin. So, right, and hins come up with like libations in the temple for different sacrifices. So they would have this measuring cup that was the size of a hin, ad kan lipar, ad kan la'ayl, ad kan lekeves. And they would have different etchings in this measuring cup, and say, okay, up until, right, so it was 6 lugin for a par, 4 lugin for a ram, and 3 lugin for a sheep. So basically, at the 6 log mark, so they would use this lime and say, hey, this is for a cow. At the 4 log mark, there would be an etching and some lime to say that this is for the ram, and at the 3 log mark, it would be like, hey, friends, this is for a sheep. Okay, and that's the lime that we're talking about. V'bay sema, or if you want, I'll say, my andipa apusa. Or if you want, we'll say, what is this andipa of Rabbi Nehemiah? It's talking about a forehead. It means a forehead. Okie dokie, so a lime that you'd put on your forehead. V'chia dahu baglila, like this person from the Galilee, Deikla leBavel, that he went to Bavel, de Amrulay, that they said to this friend from the Galilee, maybe he was from Tzfas, in the Galil, because they said, Kum droshan b'maisim merkava, come teach us about the maisim merkava, come teach us about this vision of God, described by Ezekiel, and Tzfas, of course, is the Kabbalistic city, so maybe they were saying, oh, you're from Tzfas, why don't you teach us about the maisim merkava? So Amrulu, Edyosh l'chu kedidarish Rabbi Nehemiah l'chavri, I will expound to you like Rabbi Nehemiah expounded to his friends. And I think what this means is, Kilo, sure, no problem. I will explain it to you just like Rabbi Nehemiah would talk to it. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily talking about Rabbi Nehemiah. Meaning, I think just basically means just like there was a machlokas, Rabbi Nehemiah, and like other people, whether it's this machlokas that we're talking about or just like in general. Kilo, sure, I have no problem. I'll talk to you about Maisim Merkava just like people talk about any part of Torah. So v'nafkas ar isa min kosel. Now a wasp came out of the wall, umachte ba'andipe, and stung him in the forehead, umis, and he died. Okie dokie. Or maybe the point is, like Rabbi Nehemiah is talking about this andipe, and we're saying that this wasp stung him in his forehead, and it says it's his andipe. So we see that Rabbi Nehemiah means forehead. V'amru lei, and these people in Bavel said, min dilei dalei, that from him, this happened to him. He shouldn't have been teaching about the Maisim Merkava, which is kind of funny because, after all, they're the ones who asked him. He didn't ask them. He said, they're like, hey, can you teach us about the Maisim Merkava? He's like, yeah, okay. Then a wasp comes and kill him, and they're like, oh yeah, his fault. He shouldn't have been talking about Maisim Merkava. I don't know if that was very nice of them, but alright. Zakt the Mishnah, Adame kichosem hamartzofin. Rabbi Kiva. So Rabbi Kiva says that you'll be chayav on Shabbos if you take out enough earth to create some kind of a seal for these like sacks that they would put on like boats. All right, to like seal these sacks. Okay, enough to make a seal, enough earth that you would use to make a seal for a letter to ensure that nobody opens it or that it wasn't tampered with by the time you get it. Zevel v'chol hadak, fertilizer and very thin sand. Kedei l'zabel kelach shel kruv to Rabbi Akiva. According to Rabbi Akiva, you have to take out enough in order to use as fertilizer for a stalk of cabbage. V'chachamam kedei l'zabel krisha, whereas the chacham say enough in order to put fertilizer on a leek. Chol hagas, very thick sand. Kedei litain al malo kaf sid, enough to put on a spoon's worth of lime. Kone, a reed. Kedei lasos kulmus, in order to make it into a writing utensil. Ve'im haya ave, but if it was too thick, or marusas, or if it was had like cracks in it, kedei levashal bo beit sakala shebebeitzim trufa unesuna beilpas. So it would have to be large enough that you can burn it and use it as a fuel, and that will give you enough fuel to cook a beit sakala, a egg that cooks very quickly. Trufa that is already whisked up, unesuna beilpas, and already put in the pan. So it just has to be enough heat to kind of just quickly cook a egg. Okay, says the Gemara, Amalo kaf sid. So the Gemara says that you have to take out enough thick sand in order to put on a spoon full of lime, of fine. So Tana, we learn in the Brisa, Kedeliten al pi kaf shel sayadin. Okay, enough sand to put on top of this spoon that the plasterers use, and I guess they put this lime in the spoon, and then if you can, I guess, however much sand you would put on top of that is how much you'd be chayav for taking out on Shabbos. Man Tana d'chol ma'ale le l'sid. Who is the Tana who says that sand is good and beneficial for plaster? So Amar Rav Chizda, Rabbi Yehuda. So Rav Chizda said it is Rabbi Yehuda the Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, lo yisod lo yasud adam es beiso basid. So after the Beis Hamikdash, after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, they made a gezerah that nobody can plaster their house with plaster because it looks too beautiful. It's white, it's beautiful, and as a gezerah that we don't want things to be too beautiful, so they say don't plaster your house, don't cover your house with plaster. Elim kain erev boteven ochol, unless you mix in with it straw or sand. If you mix in straw or sand, it'll make it kind of a blacker color, and it's not so beautiful, and you can use it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Teven muter chol asur. Rabbi Yehuda says you can mix your plaster with straw, but don't mix it with sand, mipneshu traxid, because it makes it very, very strong plaster. So we see that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that sand makes strong plaster, and therefore it would be him who says that you should not write that you're chayav on Shabbos if you take out enough sand that you would apply to plaster. Okay. Rav Amar filutema rabbanan kilkulo zeu tikuno. You can even say that even the Mishnah is according to the Rabbanan, who say that you would put sand into the plaster to kind of make it worse, but at the end of the day, by adding the sand, you can now make the plaster usable, and therefore there is a reason that you would want to apply sand to this plaster. And therefore, you could say even the Mishnah is according to Chachamim, and that you'll be chayav if you put in enough sand that you would apply to the plaster in order to make it usable to build your house post Beis Hamikdash destruction era. Kane kedelasos kumus. If you take out a reed large enough to make a pen for a scribe, Tana kumus amagia lekishra etzba'osav. So we learn in a brisa that this pen needs to be large enough that it gets to the joints in your fingers. By Rav Ashi asks, Kesher ha'elyon or Kesher ha'tachton? Are we talking about the knuckles, like the highest up knuckles, the knuckles that are connect your fingers to the rest of your hand? Or are we talking about the knuckles in the middle of the fingers? And the Gemara says, Teku, we don't know the answer. V'maya ave chule. If we said that if the reed was too thick to make into a pen, or it had cracks in it, so then if it's large enough to use as fuel, and it will be able to cook a egg that cooks quickly, then you'll be chayiv. Tana trufa b'shemen unusunu be'ilpas. This egg needs to be already like what's it called when you mix the egg, whatever? I don't know if whisking is the right word, but I don't know. You mix it up or whatever, and then mix it up with oil, I guess, and you put it in the pan, and at that point you just kind of light this reed and see if it'll cook the egg. So my Ravina says to his son, hey son, do you know what this very quick cooking egg is? So Amalei biasa de tziltzila. He said it's the egg of a small dove. My taima. So how come this egg of a small dove is considered a beitza kala? So mishum dezutra. So I guess his son told him, well, because it's very small. Well, ema de tziparta. So my Ravina said, well, what about the egg of a hummingbird, which is even smaller, ishtik? And his son didn't know how to answer him. So his son then said to my Ravina, he says, well, have you heard anything about this very quick cooking egg? So my brave Ravina told his son, well, Rav Shesha said it's talking about the egg of a chicken. Umay karu la beitza kala. Why do they call the egg of a chicken a beitza kala, a very quick cooking egg? Sheru chachamim, because the chachamim evaluated ein lecha beitza kala levashal yotzim beitzas tanagoles, that you don't have any egg that cooks quicker than the egg of a chicken. Umashna kol shirei Shabbis ki gogeres v'acha ki beitza. Now my brother Ravina's son asked him a very good question, which is, in general, when it comes to melachas on Shabbos that pertain to food, the shi'ur is a grogeres, is a dried fig. And over here, we seem to be evaluating a beitza, right? An egg. So Amalei Achiyamar of Nachman ki grogeres mi beitza kala. So Marbe Ravina answered his son by saying that Rav Nachman said that, yeah, over here also when we're evaluating cooking an egg, we're not talking about cooking the entire egg, which would be the shear of a beitza, just to be able to cook enough of a dried fig's worth from the egg. So the egg is really just the sort of substance that we're talking about, the material that we're talking about, but the shi'ur of that material would be enough to cook a dried fig. Friends, that was Daf Pei of Masechta Shabbos. Let's do a recap of the page. So we started off talking about taking out ink on Shabbos, and we said that you have to take out enough ink to write 2 letters. And we started getting into this idea of what if you do hotzah in 2 goes, right? Kilu, half a grogeres and then another half a grogeres, or 1 letter followed by another letter. So in the end, we basically said the rules were kind of like this. If you take out the, let's say half a fig followed by another half of a fig, okay, in 2 separate ha'alamos, ki'ilu, you took out 1 half of a fig and then you realize like, oh, oops, and then you take out a second half of the fig without realizing, so then you're going to be patur. But if it's 1 he'elem, if it's all in 1 mistake, so that without realizing in the middle that you shouldn't be taking this out, so then you will be chayiv a korban chatas, okay? Now, Rabbi Yossi says that you're only going to be chayav a korban chatas if if both halves of the fig were taken out into the same rishus harabim. But if they were 2 separate rishus harabims, so then you would be pater. And then we have machlokes in Rabba, Abaye, and Rava about how to define these 2 different, or how do you get 2 different rishus harabim. So Rabba said that each rishus harabim must be separated by a rishus hayachid, by mamish rishus hayachid in the middle. Whereas Abaye says no, it can even be a karmelis. If the 2 rishus harabims are separated by a karmelis, so then it'll be pater if you take half a gogeres into this one, then half a gogeres into the other one. Rava says no, even if it's separated by a So Abaye said even if it's separated by a karmelis, it would be considered a separation. But if it was separated by a pisla, which is this like log, so then it would you would be pater. You would be chayiv. Meaning if it's separated by a karmelis, it would be 2 separate rishus harabim, and you would be pater. If it's separated by a log, it's 1 rishus harabim, you would be chayiv. Rava says even if it's separated by a log, it would be 2 different rishus harabim, and you would be pater. And he says that we define rishuyos by Shabbos in the same way that we define them for divorce documents. Okay, we got into eyeshadows for 1 eye. The Gemara said, who puts eyeshadow on 1 eye? Rav Huna pointed out that there actually are certain women who dress in such a manner that they literally only expose 1 eye, but they do nonetheless put eyeshadow on that eye. And so there you have it. We then brought a brisa though, which kind of specifically said that when it comes to cosmetics, meaning eyeshadow that's being used for cosmetic reasons, so it would have to be put on both eyes. So we say that is specifically in villages where you don't really have these women who are covering themselves up with the exception of just 1 eye. So there it would be both eyes. Then we talked about all sorts of different quantities and definitions when it comes to lime. I'm not really going to go into too much detail there. I think it was pretty detailed. And then we talked about adding sand to lime. Rabbi Yehuda said that adding sand to lime actually strengthens the lime, so it's good for the lime, because we got into this idea of after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so then we didn't, they said don't make your house out of lime anymore because it looks too nice. So you have to add some like straw or some sand. So Rabbi Yehuda says you can't add sand because sand actually makes the lime stronger. So we see that Rabbi Yehuda says that sand is good for lime, so he must be the author of our Mishnah who says that you're chayav on Shabbos when you take out enough sand that you would put into the lime. And the Chacham, but then we say that no, you can even argue that the author of the Mishnah is the Chachamim, that they say even though sand isn't necessarily good for the lime, but it will allow you to use it in your house. So therefore, enough sand that will allow you to use the lime / plaster in your house, so you'll be chayav for taking it out on Shabbos. Friends, that was Daf Pei. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.